June 19, 2017 Policy Review Committee meeting being held at the Daniel Boone Administration Building in the cafeteria. Present around the table from the committee, from the board are
Scott Potts.
Carol Bites,
Jim
and
Harris.
from administration.
Jim Harris.
Kathy Hayes.
And there's one member of the public here. Could we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the highest priority tonight, I understand, is policy number 609, and that's investment of district funds. Perhaps our business office could give us some scope on this, summary. What's the...
This is just a new investment strategy that has taken place with Act 10, and all the districts were, it's recommended in order for us to invest in those type of investments that are covered under Act 10, we need this policy in place because the older policies restrict us from doing certain investments.
Okay.
So Act 10 was
Thank you.
implemented. Hislop and Pliget, which are banking, they're Pennsylvania State, the liquid asset fund that we use right now. But there's also the Pliget, which is the other banking investment that's for school districts and government.
Okay.
In order to do the investments, the interest rate is a lot better. So it would be a nice revenue enhancement there if we would be able to get that passed.
So is this a new Act 10, or is it just, what's the new?
Came around back about a year ago that it was introduced. Oh, sorry.
I know there's been complaints about the committee meetings
that's
not
right.
being well recorded or available to the public.
Act 10 was implemented probably 2016 is when it came about.
Except for
March 25th, 2016. I know it was about a year ago. We had implemented it, and now we're just updating our policies. A lot of the other districts are investing in it. Hislop almost has their structure in place to do it. Pliget already does.
Okay. And I see that we're designating very specifically that the chief financial officer is the investment officer. If we had some discussion on that. And I don't see, I just have, are we getting an investment plan, or will we be getting an investment plan from the business office as specified under delegation of responsibility? Second paragraph from the bottom, investment officer shall prepare for approval of the board an annual investment plan for all general and segregated designated funds of the district, including bond proceeds, taking into account the anticipated liquidity needs of each fund.
Absolutely. It's small now because there's not a lot to play with. So we have one fund, and it is reported monthly in the treasurer's report.
Okay. Thank you.
It's amazing how much they've added.
A lot of stuff.
So
Yes. And Pliget is right up to date with it. Pliget has the everything in place that you can invest. We actually have the account set up. We just don't have any money in it. And Pisloff said, I think Pisloff will be on board probably within the next couple months.
I didn't see that where, you know how we did the swap, the interest rate swap last year? Is that no longer, I didn't see that language in here that
Oh, no,
allow-
swaps are no longer.
Swaps have been
Yeah, that
eliminated.
wasn't good
Okay, thank
practice.
you. Anything else?
I like it. This is going to interact with our financial planners per se.
Yes.
So
So you're saying this will guide their actual behavior, their recommendations? Everybody will be on board with Act 10 going forward? And
A lot of
we'll use-
districts already, our Boyertown's a big player in it right now. They already have the funds already in those accounts. So the interest rate definitely, the basis points, when you look at the differences between where we're at, what we're investing in now with our current policy based on what we could, there is definitely a difference.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're quite familiar with it, which is where I get my comfort, that you know the Act 10, you'll keep us compliant. Okay, so we're going to recommend this
Recommend
for the
it.
full board? Okay, thank you. Next up, I'd like to look at policy 223. It's the use of bicycles and motor vehicles. Is this a new policy for us, Mr. Hurley? Is it completely new? It says new. Is it- Do you have any concerns about it?
Yeah, it's a new policy. I mean, we have policies and words in our policy, but like guidelines and things in our handbooks and stuff, we aren't codifying the policies.
Right, so now so they were in the student policy.
They've been
Oh,
approved
student
by
manual.
similar types of things like the student handbook.
Right, okay. So now it's codified by our policies and gives the administration then a little bit more authority to enforce these rules.
Do we have students that are riding bicycles right now in any of the schools?
I'm sure we do.
The high school.
Yeah, I'm sure we do somewhere.
I mean, I'm just concerned, we need to measure what routes they could run. Obviously, if it's a hazardous route.
Yeah, I mean, like your middle school doesn't because you're on a hazardous
Yeah,
route.
me too.
Burnsboro may be an example where you would not have a hazard. Monocacy, clearly, they're not riding bicycles in Monocacy given the location of that. Your high school, they're not going to have a couple kids riding bikes to your
I would
high
believe
school.
that would be doable.
And I would think AEC could too, coming from the
You're correct. AEC
JC
could
development.
Developments.
Okay, so as long as the hazardous routes are considered before the principals give the permission, I don't think the board has a problem with that. This committee has a problem with that policy either. So we're going to recommend 223 for full board also. Any other comments on that from anybody present? Mr. Schmidt, you have any comments, being the exercise guy? Encouraging more people to bike safely to school? Okay, next up, if you don't mind, I'd like to look at 222, tobacco. Tobacco's not permitted under any circumstances. The student is caught with tobacco. He gets reported to the parents and to the police, the local jurisdiction. There is an exception here for a student with disability. So I guess is our special ed department would be involved if it was a student with a disability.
Tobacco?
Tobacco,
Yeah.
yeah. Or smokeless tobacco, by the way, in any form. Parents are supposed to be notified whether or not. Let's see that. Superintendent or designee shall inform parent guardian whether or not the local police department that has jurisdiction over the school property has been or may be notified. And then by the end of the year, we're supposed to get, a full report is supposed to be filed in accordance with the law. The Office of Safe Schools. I guess you're aware of that.
We do a report. It's
And that would include tobacco exclusively, right? Okay. So I don't have a problem with that.
I mean, common sense would tell us right now at this point, this is something that's probably monitored anyway. So we just had it
Codified,
updated.
As soon as everything's settled.
So I think the committee is going to recommend this to the full board also, policy number 222, tobacco. Next, the committee would like to consider dress and grooming, 221. It's a new policy from PASBA.
Now, tell me, how does this combine with what we have now? I mean, goes down to the building principals that monitor
Yeah,
dress code?
but the actual details of it is actually done at the building level in terms of that. What you have there in front of you is a generic policy. I mean, it kind of gives an overview. The goal, dress codes don't regulate fashion. That's not the intent. The intent of dress codes is to make sure that it's not being distracted from teaching, learning, and student safety within reasonable parameters. We're
So
not
it's
gonna be,
up to the
you know,
discretion of each building principal?
Yeah, and if we, like, for example, I mean, like, this summer, we're having our secondary principals are getting together, you know what I mean, just to make sure we're in line with each other, in terms of those things, dress code and things like that. But what you have in front of you is a very generic, just basically giving them the authority to regulate in a reasonable fashion dress codes, which are going to be addressed in the handbooks that will be coming to the
Okay.
Again, just kind of codifying practices that are already in place in the district, so that committee is going to recommend this for the full board. Also, that's policy number 221. And then policy number 220, we'd like to discuss next, student expression, distribution, and posting of materials. Looks like it's a brand-new policy with brand-new, all-new language. Have you had a chance to look at that, Mr. Hurley, where you can bring us up on that one?
I was trying to look for the definition of what they can and cannot post. So I don't, say for instance, if you have a candidate who would like to vote and bring the voting students on board with it. I mean, obviously they can't do that, but what else would be in there that they could not post?
Carol, what you have here is basically what's freedom of expression, what's not freedom of expression. This has been fairly well established in case law in regards to that.
It is defined
This is
in here,
pretty
too.
generic
Yeah.
language in regard to it.
It's-
It's been established.
I see that, thank you, Mr. Hurley. It is clearly defined in PA Code 12.9.
Yeah.
Clearly what. And that will be referenced in the policy, so it's pretty straightforward then, right out
There's
of
nothing here.
the
This is
state law.
generic. It's all been litigated in this area pretty heavily, so
Okay, and you're comfortable with it?
I'm very comfortable with
Good.
this.
All right, so the committee is going to recommend passing 220 onto the full board, and that was called Student Expression, Distribution, and Posting of New Materials. Okay, so in light of the abbreviated session and the fact that the full committee was not able to meet tonight, we, unless anyone else from the administration or from the board members that have arrived are interested in us reviewing any of these other policies from the agenda, we're going to go ahead and cut the meeting a little short because we weren't quite prepared to have a full meeting tonight. Is that
Carol,
okay?
one of the policy, I think if we have 5 minutes just to talk about it a little bit.
Absolutely.
If you look at policy number, and at least bring it to your attention, policy number 211,
Over.
the student accident insurance and sports, that is different from current practice. Proposed policy there says the board shall require parents and guardians who participate in interscholastic sports, cheerleading, things of that nature, to purchase student accident insurance through the school district or provide copies of their insurance. Now, most of our parents have insurance. That is not currently a requirement. And the only reason why I say it might be worth discussing a little bit tonight is we do have sports seasons coming up, and we can certainly say if we end up passing that in September, it won't be in effect in the fall. But that's something to think about, or at least as a group, do we want to mandate that? Certainly, George can add more color to the number of kids that are affected. But my understanding is you're going to be looking at about 10 kids that might be affected where they don't have their own personal insurance. And that's pretty standard among, like when you look at youth sports, require families to have their own personal insurance, not just recommend, so that's something to think about. Certainly in our next meeting, when I go through that.
So what's the cost of for the students that cannot provide or they have to go out and purchase?
Yeah, and and I'll defer to the business office on the costs to that, and I don't know if Kathleen's going to be, I think Lauren would be the best one to answer that, but the actual cost, unless George, you know off the top of your head. See if I can find out. Yeah, we can get that to you.
So your concern is that since this is the last meeting of the committee until August?
Yeah, I guess what we need to do is if we don't pass something like this, and say we decide we want to pass this as a group, then if we don't pass this, we probably want to make it retroactive for the winter season going into rather than the
Okay.
fall season. Yeah,
Okay.
As long as you're okay with that, I'm fine with that. And just continue with our current practice until the winter season, if indeed the board decides
Or
to
does
change
want
it.
to change
Yeah.
the practice. I see from Mr. Scott's notes that it was supposed to go to legal review.
Yeah, I
Mr.
talked to
Sears.
Brian a little bit about that to see if legally if this is accurate and just informally with him. And yeah, we can do this. You know what I mean? He just said, because he works with other districts, it is common
It is
practice.
common?
Yeah, it's common. I can tell you,
So-
just working with youth sports organizations, it's very common. If you're playing for a youth sports, the parent has to provide insurance for the
So you do see this as a deficiency in the district, and you would encourage us to?
Yeah, and I'm not the legal expert, but I would, my
You
common sense
personally would
tells me,
also?
being involved in
Okay.
sports, that that's pretty common practice.
And our solicitor actually conferred with you?
Yes, we did confer with them.
I'm going to recommend we move it forward pending Mr. Suber's
Right.
written comments
And we can
for
hear
the full
from
board.
Mr. Schmidt as far as the cost.
What are your thoughts, Stuart? That's the end of
Yeah, and pending, we'll just hold it, we'll pass it pending the missing information and the written comment from Mr. Subers and then some dollar figures from you guys.
Have we had any instances where students were hurt that didn't have coverage?
Not since I've been here.
There's just a hole we're trying to plug. Well, I think it's
This hasn't
necessary.
been mandated before, that like officially
Right,
mandated. It's been my
right.
understanding of past practices.
Would you also, Careful, do you also favor this policy, Mr. Schmidt? You see it as common sense? Something we should- Okay. So if you could just get us some numbers as this process goes along, and we're going to recommend that 211 gets moved to the full board also.
So we get the cost of the kids.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, we know that's going to come up in discussion when it goes to the full board, so it would be good if we had that at that time, and we could probably move it right along. I'm
Makes sense.
hoping.
Thanks, Council.
Sure. Okay, anything else? You good? Okay, so I'm going to adjourn the June 19 Policy Review Committee. Actually, I'm going to do one last call from anybody present, from the administration or from the board. Any other policies you want to discuss tonight? Member of the public? Is there anything on the agenda you'd care to discuss? Have any comments or anything? Okay, so I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 7:23.